What is going on, everybody? You are in the right place if you are looking for a summary of the final book of the trilogy, which is Shadow and Bone. This last one is called Ruin and Rising. Highly recommend this little trilogy. It's really fun, it's young adult, it's easy to read. Please be advised that this video contains major spoilers. You should only be tuned in if you want to know everything that happened in the final book of the Grishaverse. Grishaverse, I've been calling it Grishaverse, but I think they pronounce it Grishaverse in the movies. I don't know, I'll need to look into that. But this book picks up exactly where book 2 left off, which is called Siege and Storm. Book 2 frustrated me for a while, which is why I stepped away from this series for a whole year and a half, but I wish I didn't. If you found yourself in a similar situation where you don't want to finish the last book, I highly recommend that you do. Do not do what I did, take a year and a half off, because it was tough to make the decision to come back to this world, but I'm so glad I did. I was really just determined to crank out the rest of the series, finish up the trilogy, and I cannot tell you how proud of myself that I am for doing that, and it took me way too long. If you found yourself frustrated with book 2, you are not alone. There were some romance aspects that I was really hoping would pan out in book 2, but alas, it did not. But we finally have the sweet resolve of this romance between Mal and Alina come to fruition, which was really nice. This book picks up where it left off between Alina and her crew and the Darkling and his crew. Alina ends up powerless and she is underground and hiding. This little underground city is pretty much managed and maintained by the Apparat, which we don't really like him. We don't know if we can or should trust him, but he's just kind of there, and it's kind of this relationship that they have to make work, but they're always kind of at odds with each other. Alina is completely powerless. She is very weak. She hasn't seen the sun in several weeks, and so she is kind of in this recovery mode, but thank goodness Mal and the crew find a way to break out of this cavern type living situation that they are in. They finally escape. They try to make peace with the Apparat and say, hey, we need to unify, we need to come together, but the way that we want to achieve our ultimate goals are totally different. You need to let us go. And we need to find Nikolai. We need to defeat the Darkling. They have all these goals and they cannot do it while they're locked in the cavern, but luckily Mal and his crew end up finding a way to get them out. They then go on this journey, number 1, to try to find Nikolai, who may or may not be dead, and then number 2, find the Firebird, which is the third amplifier, which is what Alina needs to defeat the Darkling. Okay, so they're going on this journey. Along the way, Alina and her crew are attacked by a bunch of deserters, and this is the moment where Nikolai comes in and he saves the day. He is witty, he is charming, he is an easy fictional character to really fall in love with. He has such great witty banter. Him and Alina, they're interesting because you almost want to root for them as a couple, even though I didn't in book 2. He kind of messed up the romance I was really craving between Mal and Alina, but they have a really cute relationship. It's kind of a flirtatious friendship kind of situation, but you know, in Alina's heart, she wants to be with Mal. That is who she's always wanted to be with, and you wait this entire series for them to be together. But Nikolai ends up saving the day. Thank goodness. He comes along on their journey. He takes them to his little retreat, which is kind of in this mountain crevasse area, which is kind of cool. He's develop these kind of airships type things, and so I sound silly talking about it, and I'm not doing the book justice. I hate that I'm doing it this way because I want this book to sound very appealing to you, so if it doesn't, that is on me. This is a phenomenal trilogy, so please give it a shot. But they end up coming together, Nikolai and his crew, Alina and Mal and their crew. Along the way, they are confronted by the Darkling, and unfortunately, in this moment, Alina and her crew, they are overwhelmed with the shadow figures that the Darkling is using to pick apart everyone else. And Bagra, which if you do not know, From the previous series, we understand that Baghra is actually the Darkling's mother. She ends up sacrificing herself in order to save the crew, and so she ends up toppling over the edge of a balcony or a cliff, wherever it is that they are, and she ends up sacrificing herself, which Alina was really sad to see her go. Even though she is a crotchety, gripey old woman, she had her value for sure. That was a tough part of the story. I have to go back because I forgot to talk about Nikolai. In that scene where the Darkling actually attacks the rest of the crew, and this is before Baghra gives up her life, the Darkling actually turns Nikolai into, I don't know what kind of creature he is. It's like a shadowy dragon bird type situation. I don't know. I can't do justice to it, but it's really cool. And you start to see him lose his humanity. He ends up flying off, but he ends up kind of following Alina from afar and watching their journey from afar when they're searching for the Firebird at this point in time. And there is a moment where Nikolai does make contact with Alina, and he still has enough human in him to have the presence of mind to try to get her to fill his body and his soul with sunlight, thinking that they could burn away the shadows and the darkness. There's a moment where we actually think it's working, and the darkness is starting to dissipate, his body is starting to change back to normal, but in the end, it ultimately doesn't work. Things are not that easy, right? As much as we want them to be. And Nikolai ends up continuing to have to be this monstrous creature that just kind of watches them from afar. But he kind of goes off and does his own thing, and your heart hurts for him in this moment because he is a prince. He is born to lead, and you just see him in a different capacity where he's not in his element and he's trying to fight this darkness. But Alina and her crew, they end up getting away. They pursue the Firebird. Lo and behold, they actually find the bird, and it's pretty early in the story, and you're kind of surprised because this was the ultimate goal. This was the journey. This was the objective, and they find it pretty early on. The shocking revelation is this. They know that the moment they encounter the Firebird, that is not the final amplifier. They kind of journey back into Morozova's story a little bit more and talk about him and his family, how brilliant he was, but he was a little unconventional and he was dabbling in powers that are far beyond most of humanity's understanding. But it turns out that in his past, he actually was dabbling with the amplifiers, and he created an amplifier with one of his children. He resurrected one of his two daughters, and by the way, the other daughter that was not resurrected, that was Baghra. So it's her sister who was resurrected when she was a young child. She ended up getting killed, and he brought her back to life, therefore instilled that power in her. And so that has traveled down the bloodlines, and wouldn't you know it, here's the twist that no one saw coming, but Mal is one of the great descendants of Morozova, so guess what? Mal here is our third amplifier, which is tragic because Alina has to murder the third amplifier in order to obtain the power from it. Oh my gosh. In that moment, I don't know how I didn't see it coming. Well, I do know how I didn't see it coming because it's not something that I don't think anyone could have anticipated, but wow, Leah Bardugo, I swear, she did an incredible job with this story. So Alina and Mal talk and they say, hey, Alina, you know what you have to do. If you have to, you need to kill me. You need to take in the power of the third amplifier. That's the only way you can destroy the Darkling. At first, Alina is not really about it, and then she kind of gets on board and just to appease him says, yes, okay, if I have to, I will. They finally give in to their romantic feelings for each other, I think only because they know that Mal is more than likely going to die. So it's kind of truly a now or never type of moment, which is such a sweet moment, especially because you've waited 3 books to watch this romance unfold. And as a reader, I was thinking, oh my gosh, finally, I cannot wait another moment for this to work out for them. They share a kiss, they spend the night together, they cuddle, they just appreciate the time that they have together, knowing how minimal it probably is going to be. So they end up having to confront the Darkling in the Unsea, or the Shadowfold, as they call it. And Alina has learned to do this really cool trick where she can warp light in a way that makes objects or people disappear from sight. So she's able to use that light bending technique to get in closer to the Darkling, who's kind of more so in the middle of the unsea right now. So she's using it as a way to sneak up on him and sneak attack him. And it actually is fairly successful for the most part until things start to go wrong. They start getting overwhelmed. People are dying. Mal ends up finding Alina, and he tells her, listen, you've got to take my life. You need the power of the amplifier to defeat the Darkling. Alina does not want to do it. Mal essentially forces her to stab him in the heart. And in that moment, when Mal is now deceased, she is filled with this brilliant, overwhelming power. And it's like this burst of energy, but then in a blink, it's gone. And she doesn't understand. She thinks it didn't work. She's devastated that she killed the love of her life, her best friend for many, many years for potentially no reason. But then she starts to see that this power is dispersed into other Grisha, and they are now able to summon the powers of the sun, which is really cool. Now, before you get too devastated about losing Mal, he actually comes back to life, which ordinarily I do not like that. When characters are passed into the afterlife, I very much like them to stay there, only because it's more realistic from my perspective. If you keep bringing people back from the dead, you just stop taking it seriously and you kind of scoff at it and you think, oh, well, is anyone really dead? You just never believe it. But in this sense, I was okay only because you consider the backstory of Morozova and how he resurrected one of his children. So when it comes down to the bloodline and what Mal actually is a descendant from, it kind of makes sense. Morozova was kind of this eccentric, crazy dude who figured out how to manipulate these powers and create something amazing, and in doing so he had that power to resurrect. So I understand if you're like me and you kind of don't like the whole resurrection thing. Typically I'm very much against it. In this case, I was okay. I actually really enjoyed it. Just before Mal comes back to life, Alina actually stabs the Darkling and she kills the Darkling. I don't know how you all felt about that. Did it have to happen? Absolutely. That was probably always part of the plan. It just had to happen, but you can't help but feel for the Darkling, especially because there's an excerpt in the final book where they talk about an incident from his childhood where his powers frightened others, and when others discovered that he was an amplifier, they tried to sabotage him and take his life so they could obtain his powers. You can't help but feel for the Darkling. In book one, I will admit, I was a proponent for some time of Alina and the Darkling, until I realized that I was not anymore. And then I reverted back to Alina and Mal, which I've been pretty loyal to their partnership throughout most of the books, but I did have some feelings for the Darkling. I kind of hoped that that would work out at some point in time. However, the Darkling is no more. And it was a beautiful ending because Alina knew that the only way that she could live out a normal life and the life that she wanted was if she died as a saint. So she actually kind of fakes her death. They have a funeral where they actually have a ceremony with her next to the Darkling. And as spectators are watching, they think, some are not eager to see this because they think, you know, what is a heathen like the Darkling doing on the same pedestal as our sun summoner, Saint Alina, you know, so it's kind of an interesting turn of events. But Alina, who has white hair now, by the way, that never goes back to normal, she is able to live under the radar. So her and Mal finally end up together, and it's the sweetest ending of all time because they end up rebuilding the orphanage and giving orphans the love, time, and attention that they all require. They're obviously very traumatized by the lives that they lived before settling down, before defeating the Darkling, but all of the necessary parts to give children a kind, loving home are all there. And that brings me to the very last page of the book, which has such an amazing quote And it's so simple. Honestly don't know why I like it so much, but you can find it on page 417. The very end of the story goes like this. They had an ordinary life full of ordinary things, if love can ever be called that. I think because we consider love to be this incredible emotion, we don't think of it as ordinary, yet sometimes the most beautiful things in life are ordinary. Personally, for me, I don't need all this excitement. I'm not trying to fight darklings and stuff just to have a really exciting life. Like, I want something like this. I like ordinary. I like the way that she ended it, is all I'm saying. If you watched the other video that I did, just a brief synopsis of the story, I also mentioned another one of my favorite quotes. You can find it on page 171. It has to do with suffering, and it is a line from Bagra. And she says, "Suffering is cheap as clay and twice as common. What matters is what each man makes of it." I really like that because I like the comparison of suffering and clay. Haven't quite heard that before, but there are little nuggets like this throughout the book. While Leigh Bardugo keeps it very simple, very entertaining, there are some thought-provoking moments that she did a great job with. I could not recommend this series more. Once again, I may have said this in my other video, I like the books better than the TV series, so sorry. But I actually haven't watched the second season yet. I plan on doing that this weekend. The first TV series I thought was well done, but I'm just such a book nerd. That was what I really enjoyed most. So I hope you found this video helpful. Please subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be talking a lot more about other works of fiction, so leave me some comments below. Did you read this series? Did you like it? Did you like how it ended? Do you like the book better? Do you like the TV series better? I want to chat more about this. Tell me your thoughts, and thank you so much for tuning in.